Welcome to the regular meeting of the Danville City Commission for Monday, February the 12th, 2018. The hour being 5:30. I looked to my right, I looked to my left. We do have a quorum. So I will call us to order, and I will ask that we be led in prayer by Commissioner Saris.
Well, as per usual, I don't typically do prayers. I'd rather do moments of silence, and it's unfortunate when things happen that cause this. And so our neighbors to the west over in Marshall County had a tragedy not so long ago, and I was just over there last week doing some work and seeing how those folks are pulling together. They're being Marshall strong because they're such a small community that they certainly know the victims and they know the relatives of the victims. So I would ask that we take a moment of silence and think about those relatives and the victims themselves. Amen and thank you.
Amen, and we pray it never happens here. I'd like to ask that we be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by Commissioner Cottle.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, you have before you the agenda of the evening. If there are no additions or corrections or deletions, I'll assume it meets with your approval.
Yes.
We'll move on. We are in the section of the meeting tonight called Hear the Public. We have two opportunities here. This first opportunity is for the public to address any item that is on the agenda tonight. There'll be an opportunity later on in the meeting to address any item that is not on the agenda. So I believe our first person that would like to speak is Stephanie Blevins.
Well, I come on behalf of the Safe Communities Coalition of Central Kentucky, and I don't know if you remember, but 2 years ago you all invested $500 from your council to get accredited by the National Safety Council as a safe community. It took a year of preparation and it took a year of application, but I am proud to announce that we now have an agreement between the National Safety Council and Central Kentucky Safe Communities Coalition to implement an ongoing program of injury control through Safe Communities of America. This initiative will cover the entire communities, and which includes Boyle, Lincoln, Mercer, and Garrett counties. Not only do I want to say thank you for investing and allowing us to receive this accreditation, but there's three people here I really want to say thank you to. Mike and Ron Scott, you all were at everything that we did. We appreciate you being there and representing the City Council. And Rick, thank you so much for not only representing everything, but being a part of the task force. So I have your official certificate. I will say that this was what we considered a monumental kind of occasion. We had all four mayors and all four judge execs at the accreditation ceremony, so we really appreciate you doing that too, Mike. And the Danville City Council, you all will hold the Safe Communities flag for our community. Each county has one of these and each city council will hold it. So I'd like to present this to...
Well, look, you do it. You put in the most time. You do it. Stephanie, while we're waiting, why is this important?
This is a good question. We explained that 2 years ago, but you may have forgotten. It is great importance.
Well, I think for our audience.
What we are doing is we are trying to implement a safer community. So we are trying to prevent injuries, and we're doing that in 6 different areas. We've really focused on pedestrian safety and community engagement through our first responders. And so we had a community conversation about a year ago with them that the Safe Communities Coalition Task Force here in Boyle County put on. What this really does is we hope to reduce injury that we see in our hospitals, as well as the work that our first responders have to do. But also just coming together as a 4-county coalition, we've seen a lot of really neat things happen. So it's been great already for our communities, and we are really, like I said before, we're just beginning. So we are now accredited. Hopefully EDP can use that when we're trying to increase and encourage new businesses to come to our area. But we really appreciate your all support and vision in seeing this, so thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate you.
Take a picture, Ben. Come on, Ben. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you.
Appreciate that very
Quick
much.
comment from this podium, too. We give a lot of credit to Dr. Blevins and Dr. Tartar. They were instrumental in making this happen. And not only does the Safe Communities look for things to improve, but they will tackle things that come up, as they did down in Junction City. So good job, guys.
Thank you again. Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll move right on to item 1, which is the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting, January 22nd. Do I hear a motion to accept?
I move for approval of the minutes of January 22nd, 2018, as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Cardle. Any second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Atkins, second. Any additions, deletions, corrections? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Item 2 is the Big Brothers Big Sisters report. Ms. Richards. Hi. Glad to have you with us.
I want to apologize too for my lack of professional dress. I have 2 kids that just got diagnosed with flu.
Don't worry about it.
I thought this was covered.
I'm not worried about your dress, or you disinfected. That's what I'm worried about.
Just stay over there.
Yeah.
Okay, no problem. So I'm with Big Brothers Big Sisters. I'm the regional program manager for Boyle, Lincoln, Garrett, and Mercer counties. You all have provided us funding over the last several years, and me and our CEO and President Andrea, and we just wanted to extend the invitation to the board and to the public for our upcoming Bowl for Kids' Sake cook-off. That is going to be February 23rd at 5 o'clock at Wilderness Trail. They are generously letting us use their facilities. Learn more about Big Brothers Big Sisters, kind of what we do with the agency, and it's also kind of our kickoff for fundraising season, so it just lets you all know that we are actively doing other fundraising efforts in the county, and we want to just give you all a chance to come out. We're going to have a couple matches there as well, so you can kind of see who our program directly benefits, both our bids and our littles, get a chance to talk to them as far as a volunteer and a child standpoint. So.
What time was that?
It's going to be 5 o'clock on February 23rd. And that's going to be at Wilderness Trail Distillery. So I will, is it Donna that does the agenda? Is that who it is? Okay. I will, I can email the official invitation as well. So.
Oh,
All right.
very good.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Any
Thank you.
questions from anybody? Good luck with the kids.
Thank you.
Item 3 is the partial, should I say, recommendations for part of the Architectural Heritage Board. I'd like to recommend Dana Dixon and Mary Gerard be reappointed. I will accept a motion to that effect.
I'll move to recommend these 2 ladies be reappointed.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Atkins, seconded by Commissioner Terry. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Item 4 is recommendation from the Garden Club that they would like to request Pat Boatwright be appointed as their representative on the Beautification Committee. She will be replacing one Janice Scott, if one Janice Scott can ever be replaced. Do I hear a motion?
I move to recommend Pat Boatwright to become a member of the Garden Club.
Thanks.
Beautification Committee.
Is there a second to that?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Cardle. Any discussion?
She used to be my neighbor, and she kept everybody's yard nice and freshly cut, weed and everything else, so just miss her being in the neighborhood.
Any further comments? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Upon recommendation of the Convention and Visitors Bureau, I'd like to recommend to the Commission that John Lerner be appointed to the Tourism Board to fulfill the unexpired term of Melissa Feitbaster. And that unexpired term is on October 31, 2019. Mr. Lerner is the hotel motel representative. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Sears. Is there a second?
So seconded.
Mr. Cardle seconds. Discussion?
No, John's here. I'll wave. There you go.
Oh.
Do you want to say anything?
If there's no further questions or comments, all in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Opposed, like sign. We'll have to talk about Reno Tahoe.
What happens in Reno Tahoe stays.
You have to be able to say that first.
Item 6 is the Ethics Board alternate recommendations, which you have before you. I'd like to recommend that Bill Carter be reappointed as an alternate.
So moved.
Thank you,
Second.
Mr. Atkins and Commissioner Cottle. All in, any discussion? Being none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Item 7 is our annual audit report. Mr. Andy DeMoss of Ray, Foley, and Hensley.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, sir.
This is the city's audit for fiscal year 17. So that's June 30, 2017. We've had the audit issued for a little over a month now. Just now getting here to present it to you all. So I went ahead and gave you all a little summary of the audit I put together over the weekend that I thought there's a lot of information in here. Michelle and I were talking, it seems like it just keeps getting thicker and thicker every year. So I tried to put together a little quick summary for you that might help you follow while I go through the actual report itself. So the first part in the audit report is the independent auditor's report. It's on our letterhead, a couple pages in. And here you will see it's broken into 3 parts primarily. Management's responsibility. The financial statements themselves are the city's, they're not ours. We help put together the report, but besides that, these numbers are the performance of the city, and we're here just to provide an opinion on them. So you'll see that our auditor's responsibility is to provide enough procedures to be able to provide that opinion. And then down at the bottom of that page is our opinion that we believe the financial statements are fairly presented in all material respects, the financial position of the city. That's considered an unmodified opinion. It's the best opinion we can provide to you all. So that being said, there's a few other things on the next page that are part of the letter. This kind of covers some of the other stuff that's in the report. There's quite a bit of supplementary schedules. There's some additional letters. This kind of covers the additional reporting that's in this bound report. So we'll touch on some of those when we go through the report itself. Next on my summary here is page 9. After the audit report there, you will see management's discussion and analysis. I think this is good reading for you all if you, it kind of regurgitates the financial statements, but it also gives some summary on what actually happened and some commentary on the financial statements that management's put together. So I would suggest reading that when you have time. But on page 9, a couple things I want to point out. This is the statement of net position for the city as a whole. We're going to look at some of these funds more on an individual level when we go to the report. But a couple things I wanted to point out on here that you can really only see on this report are the net pension liabilities. Your net pension liability for the CERS for the city as a whole was $13,641,000. That was an increase from the previous year. And then the police and firefighters retirement fund, that has gone down quite a bit. It's down to $1,113,000 from the previous year, $1,749,000. So that one did decrease while the other one went up. So let's look at some of these funds on themselves. So if you'll flip to page 11, this is your balance sheet for the governmental funds. Here you'll see columns for the general fund, the road fund, and some of your non-major funds. The general fund cash was $8,670,000 at the end of the year. That was an increase from the previous year of about $1,700,000. So quite a bit of an increase in the cash balance. For the road fund, you'll see the cash balance was $551,000 at the end of the year. That was an increase of $178,000. Other governmental funds had cash of about $233,000. That also increased, and that's primarily related, I believe, to the streetscape fund. Had some increased cash in that account. So that's what you're seeing there. The rest of the stuff's primarily just timing differences from year to year or between the periods. But what we can look at on the next page, on page 12, is our statement of revenue and expenses and kind of see why those occurred. So when we look at these funds, the general fund, revenues for the city were $15,054,000. That was an increase over the previous year of $1,466,000. So your revenues kind of across the board increased over the year. Expenditures for the general fund were $13,216,000, and that also was an increase of $1,209,000. The general fund also transferred $554,000 over to other funds to help support cash flow for those funds. So overall, the change in the fund balance for the general fund was an increase of $1,284,000. So nice increase there for the general fund. On the road fund, the revenues and expenses were in line with the previous year. It kind of just depends. I think you all know on what projects you all determined to do, but the fund decreased by $13,000. The other funds received transfers of $65,000 and had an increase in $91,000 in their fund balance. Moving on from there, we have the proprietary funds on page 13. Here you'll see the three major funds are the utility fund, the parking fund, and the stormwater fund. Your other non-major funds are the cemetery, the museum, and the garbage funds. So the unrestricted utility cash was $1,101,913. That was a decrease from the previous year of $692,000. I think some of that had to do with just timing on some of the projects that were going on, or the big project on the water treatment plant. The total assets for the proprietary funds were $76,334,000. That was an increase overall of $1,778,000 from the previous year. Total liabilities also increased just a little bit. Total liabilities for all the proprietary funds were $43,465,000. Or $43,465,000. So if we look at the activities in the proprietary funds are on page 14, the revenues and expenses, and how the net position changed for those funds. Looking at the utility fund itself, the increase in that fund was $1,598,000. A lot of that was contributed to the grants of $1,204,000, which took up a lot of that increase that you're seeing there. On the parking fund, you had a decrease in net position of $15,000. But that also takes into account 211,000 of transfers that came into the parking fund to help support that fund. The stormwater fund had a net position of 183,000. That was pretty consistent, the activity, the revenues and expenses from the previous years. Other proprietary funds, as I mentioned, were the garbage, cemetery, and museum funds. These had a slight decrease in net position of $12,000, but they were supported with transfers in of $227,000 across those three funds. There are supplementary schedules where you can see each one of those non-major funds in the back if you wanted to take a look at those. Before I get into the notes, I covered a lot here. Does anybody have any questions before I move on?
I was kind of curious, I don't know if this is something, maybe something for Michelle, but the net pension liability for police and firefighters going down.
Yes, it's went down, and the main reason it's went down is because we have lost some of the people that's in our closed fund. We were down to 10 people, now we're down to 9 people, and we started the year with 13 people.
Okay.
This fiscal year, we started with 13 people. It went down to 10 by the end of the fiscal year, and now it's down to 9. That's that closed pension fund. That will continue to drop as that happens and as it gets funded more, but that's the big drop this year is because of the people have went off the pension.
Gotcha.
Questions?
I'll move on a little bit more.
I guess.
Go ahead, yes, sir.
On page 14,
Uh-huh.
the transfer of other funds for parking fund and for the other non-major proprietary funds.
Yes, sir.
Without that transfer, those balances or those net positions would be.
Quite a bit more negative, yes, sir. Yeah, those are coming from the general fund over.
That's their budgeted transfer that we budget every year during the budget process. We budget to do transfers to those that, in order to make the cash flow whole in those, we have to do those every year. And that'll continue to happen.
Till we pay them off, I guess, right? Okay. Big difference.
Okay, following the financial statements, you have the notes. A couple things, there's quite a bit in here about your accounting policies. No new accounting policies have been adopted in I take that back. There was one additional accounting policy that had to be adopted, and I'll point that out in here. But I'll point out a few highlights in here. The notes really just elaborate on the financial statements themselves. So if you'll go to page 29, you'll see a summary of capital assets. This gives you a summary of all the additions and disposals. There's quite a bit here, but what you can really see here is total capital assets that the city invested in for the governmental funds was $2,174,000. On the utility fund, or the proprietary funds, primarily the utility fund, total capital asset additions were $8,992,000. So quite a bit invested in new capital assets over the course of the year. After that, you get into several pages regarding the defined benefit pension plans. If you'll flip to page 38, or I'm sorry, 37, I'm going to touch on the CERS pension plan. Here you'll see there's a breakdown of the hazardous and the non-hazardous, in which the non-hazardous makes up $5.5 million of the pension liability. The hazardous employees make up over $8 million. But these are just an estimate, and it's not a number we come up with, and it's not a number Michelle comes up with. It's a number that's provided by the state to come onto your all's financial statements. But they are an estimate. So if you see here, if you change a 1% discount rate on how they're calculating these liabilities, it can make a drastic change in your financial statements. So all the city really can do is make the contributions that are being set, and you'll see On pages 46 and 48, there are summary of required contributions for the city. And the city has made all the contributions as determined by the state. So that's really the main thing I wanted to point out to you in regards to the pension plans. There's probably 10 pages worth of information on those here. So on the long-term debt, which is on the next page, page 38, here you'll see the governmental activities. There wasn't no new borrowings for the general fund. However, $370,000 was paid down on existing debt. And you can see down at the bottom of the page when the existing debt matures in a schedule there. On page 39 are the proprietary funds, and not a whole lot was borrowed in the proprietary funds, $341,000 for the current year, and then paid down was $827,000 for the current year. And then if you flip to the next page, you can see the future maturities of when those debts are coming due. On page 41, this is the new accounting requirement, disclosure requirement in regards to tax abatements. This was added in the current year. It's not really a large amount, but it just talks about possible ordinances that have been enacted and employers that have taken advantage of some of these existing opportunities that the city's made available. So again, it's not a large number, but it's a new accounting requirement that's been added this year. So I'm going to touch on a few other things. There's quite a bit more information in these notes, but I thought those were the highlights for you all. If you'll flip to page 58 and 59, this is your internal report on internal control over financial reporting and compliance. It's required reporting as part of governmental auditing standards. Has our letterhead on it. Here you'll notice we look for we don't just look at your day-to-day internal controls. We look at your internal controls over financial reporting and being able to put together accurate numbers. We did not identify any material weaknesses or any findings in regards to internal control in this audit, and we did not identify any compliance findings either. So clean report in that regard on this letter. Flipping ahead to page 60.
It's nice to hear.
Yes, sir. Yeah, and that's a testament to having someone qualified like Michelle, I think, on your staff that can present these financial statements.
Don't
in
say
his way.
that. She will want more money.
That's part of his tip.
Page 60, you all were subject to a single audit this year. This is your schedule of expenditures of federal awards as part of the water treatment plant. Again, you all were subject to this. You'll see the top USDA grant was over $5 million, almost $5.9 million was spent of federal funds. So that was our primary focus in our procedures. And what you'll see on the following pages, we have again another report on compliance and internal control over the federal funds. And again, we don't have any findings. It's the same program that we had audited the previous years. It's the bulk of the federal funds that you guys have coming through the city. On page 63 is the final page of the report, and this gives a good summary for you all of were there any internal control findings, were there any compliance findings, either in the financial statements or the single audit, and they're all marked no as you look down through there. So clean report, no findings to report to you all. The only thing I have left to touch on is there's a separate letter here. This kind of is our catch-all. If we needed to report that people were not getting us information or being non-cooperative, we'd report it in here. If we had a large amount of material adjustments, what we felt like what you all were receiving on a regular basis, you weren't getting accurate numbers, that would be a fine. We'd want to report that to you so you'd know that. Or if we had any other just suggestions that we had, this is kind of where we would put that type of information. There's nothing in here that that everybody was a lot of help to us, and we appreciate everybody at the city for being cooperative. And one thing I will point on here, there is something about estimates, and you'll see in here one of the major estimates is that pension calculation that we are provided by the state. So it's just an estimate that's in the financial statements. So.
What, on page 63?
Yes, sir.
Just a statement at the bottom, it just says auditee qualified as a low-risk auditee. What essentially does that
There's
mean?
certain requirements that you have to meet to meet a low-risk auditee. You have to have had a single audit the last 2 years, which you all have had, the 2 previous audits. And with those 2 audits, you have to have had the single audit filed on time. You have to have no findings in the report. What it really does is it lowers the threshold of the federal money that we have to actually look at. If you're a high-risk auditee, then we have to look at more.
Okay.
But even then, if you were considered a high risk, we're still going to look at that big grant that came through that was the bulk of the money.
Right.
Yep.
And does the word high risk or risk here relate to your liability as an auditor? Is that what we're saying here? Because if we've got more dollars that you have to audit and verify,
Right.
that's risk on you all.
It's part of our risk assessment. It's not really. You guys could have great financial records and not have had a single audit for several years. Like you said, it's more on our end. But since you have had those consecutively, sure. Yes.
That's what I want to clarify.
Yep.
Thank you.
Questions? Is there any suggestion for improvement anywhere?
We did not have anything that we mentioned in here. I'm sure I've talked to Michelle over the course of the audit process. I'm trying to think of, there wasn't anything specifically that we thought needed to be addressed and communicated to you all. I'm trying to think what we talked about.
We always talk about little things that we can do to make things better and tighter in the process and in internal control processes, and we always welcome what their advice is, and as a management role, we discuss those with Ron, and we've implemented smaller things of how, we sign out things and how we make sure we do our POs correctly. We, they always give us little tweaks, suggestions, and 9 times out of 10, we jump straight on them and make them before they even leave. And the other one, we try to get in before they get to the next audit. And there's always little things like that. Like this year, we talked about credit cards, and we kind of changed how we check out credit cards a little bit more control on that. It's just little things, and we try to keep those under control so that we don't get anything written up and he doesn't have to formally do anything. So if they see any little thing that they can tweak, we take that into consideration at that point in time.
How many cities do you audit?
We audit, our firm does between probably 25 and 30.
What's the largest? What's the smallest?
Trying to think, what is the largest? Probably Covington, maybe. Yeah, they might be the largest. Smallest? I'm trying to. Have you ever heard of Jeffersonville?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Out in by Mount Sterling. They're pretty tiny. I don't know if for sure if those are the
So we fall
largest
somewhere in
ones.
between.
Yes,
obviously.
sir. Yes, sir.
And-
We
and-
see.
And based on your collective view of the clients you audit, scale of 1 to 10, where are we? 10 being best, 1 being worst.
You're being recorded.
Well, they're not all my clients. I probably have about 8 of them, so I don't know if I can go full 10, but I'd say 9 or 10. Yeah, you all do a great job. I mean, it's the type of job we want everybody to try to move towards. I mean, just the way that the records are kept, and we try to work with people in that regard, but I think your all staff does a great job.
Any more questions of Mr. DeMoss? Do we need to make a motion to accept this? Okay. With that, sir, we wish you safe travels home.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Will it be put on the website? Or is it already on the website?
Yes, we'll get it on the website tomorrow. The whole audit will be on the website.
Michelle's proud of it.
Yeah. We have 2 copies each, so if anybody wants a copy tonight, they're welcome to one of mine.
And thanks for doing the summation.
Yeah,
That's good.
it might not be, I did it real quick, but thought it might help y'all.
Well,
Good.
yes.
Very much so. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Michelle, I guess we should thank you as well. That's a
Absolutely.
great report, you know, and you won't even bring pizza to us, but you got a good report.
I won't pay for pizza, but our staff does really well. We have a really good finance staff right now, and they do a really good job.
Now we know why Michelle always tells us no.
Moving to the next subject, item 8 is the code enforcement report. Ms. Lester, the floor is yours.
Good evening.
Good evening.
As you can see on your report for the month of January, we had 130 inspections. We issued 18 business licenses, and we recovered 17 liens for $4,361. We issued 72 parking citations, and I'll entertain any questions you might have on that report before we go on.
When we recover liens, I think I've asked this before, or someone has. When we recover liens, does that necessarily mean that they have improved the property, or they're just paying the
They're just
fines?
paying what, usually it's for work we've done, is why we put the lien on there, so they're paying off for what we've maintained the property, either mowing the yard or demolishing the property or whatever.
Okay.
I want to compliment you on the dealing with the cans on Ben Ali and citation. That's been a hot topic of discussion.
Yes, that one's a challenge, as the other places are. You had asked me at the last meeting to look into how other cities might be handling liens and what we might be able to do for that. So you do have a report in there that Officer Broach compiled as to what other cities are doing, and we're doing a whole lot more than they are. But they're not putting the list in the newspaper or anything like that. So we are still evaluating if sending the letters out is beneficial or not, and we'll continue to evaluate that as to whether we keep doing that or not. But as the interest is added each month and we send out a new letter to the property owner, we put the copy of the report on our website and make that available if anyone wants to see it.
Bridget, I think that's something's worth pointing out here too, as well as we made a renewed effort in code enforcement the past 2 years. I'd say the survey, I don't know if you've had a chance to look at that report in particular or not, but the cities that are surveyed there typically file the liens and then do nothing. So for the sake of argument and the criticism that is sometimes espoused that the city just doesn't do anything, that may be, that first of all, that's not true here based on the, especially the efforts the past several years. However, cities of Covington, Louisville Metro, Bardstown, and Georgetown file the liens and then do nothing. So we should know through a survey of some of our counterparts, and some of which that we share quite a bit in common with, simply file the liens, and they are there to either be collected when others foreclose or not. And some of it could be for policy reasons. Most likely, it's due to resources and legislative priorities. But anyway, I thought that'd be worth noting to you and for the benefit of the public that most cities in Kentucky simply don't go after the lien holders through independent foreclosure processes, even though you are entitled to. An exception to that would be Lexington Metro, which when liens get over $5,000, they do seek some legal remedy at that point, but under $5,000, they do not.
So we've got 3 properties, three vacant lots that are being maintained by the city. So when are we going to get those disposed of?
And we need to talk about each one of those individually. For the sake of conversation, let's just deal with 318 Caldwell Street. That property was demolished in November of 2016 and has liens totaling $17,000. Now, in that particular case, the city has a lien on the property and could foreclose it. Now, how much is a vacant lot worth on Caldwell Street? That, I don't know, but you have to make that determination. So what you have to say is, in order for you to vote affirmatively to proceed with foreclosure, you're going to have the legal expense and cost of going through that process, and that at the end of the day, you're going to have a $17,000 lien plus costs for a property that when it sells at the Master Commissioner's sale, will it bring $20,000 to cover your expenses? No. But does the city say, well, as a matter of policy, we're going to go through the process, and at the end of it, we're either going to own it, because you can submit a credit bid, so the city would have a judgment of up to that amount and could bid up to that amount to sell the property. At the end of the day, that city would then own it, and then you'd be in a position of surplusing it and trying to sell it independently, and plus having it on your as an insured interest at that point. Or do you say, I'm going to go in and bid $5,000 at the auction and hope to recover something, and then get it in someone else's hands who may or may not do anything with it at that time? So the point is, the city has tremendous resources already in it at $17,000. Do you want to expend more resources on an quote-unquote asset, for lack of a better term, that you may not have any chance of recovering?
So is there any opportunity here, let's say it's determined that we're not going to recover, we go through a process, we don't recover, can the city then at that point say donate that to Habitat for Humanity or something like that? I mean,
the city doesn't yet own it, though. That's the thing. The city's a lien holder. The city could purchase it through a credit bid at the Master Commissioner's sale.
Mm-hmm.
As far as
well, so if we get anything out of it monetarily, we probably can't do that.
well, what the city could do is surplus it and then say we're going to take closed bids from it, and perhaps Habitat would submit a bid for it. I don't think that the city could simply give it, but the city could say we're going to accept bids at that time, and Habitat, there was a time where Habitat was very interested in any lot it could get its hands on, and I think would pay generally about $10,000 for a lot. So there's something that could be worked out if they were interested and submitted a bid. And I think that'd be the most appropriate procedure, probably.
But if you do nothing, know that your expenses are still going to continue.
Correct.
Because we're still going to continue to have to mow it and maintain it.
Yeah, we need to do something.
Would you rather
So-
have something there than nothing there?
Ideally, what you would have is someone like Habitat come to the Master Commissioner's sale and actually submit a bid at the sale, and it never actually get into the city's possession. That's the ideal situation. Not only Habitat, but any interested party for development, you would hope they would buy it at the sale, as opposed, the longer the city has its finger in the process, the more expense and cost you will incur.
So Is the commission going to receive a recommendation from staff as to what to do and when?
I think what we were prepared to do tonight was to, upon your direction, was ask that you authorize us to bring a recommendation for each particular property. I wish it was as simple as saying, we recommend that all properties follow a certain course of action. But each one of these is so unique in character and in ownership and value and risk and reward that they warrant an independent assessment that, quite frankly, is time-consuming. So that's okay, but we feel like that'd be the most prudent action. It's probably not wise to just say anything over $5,000 we want to foreclose on. I think they're much more unique than that.
And that's fine. Again, do we get a recommendation from staff on each property and when?
I think that was going to be our recommendation to you tonight, is for you to direct staff to prepare an individual assessment for the properties that are on this dilapidated structures for current demolition and in the vacant properties after demolition list.
So let me ask the commission, do I hear a motion to that effect?
Yeah, I'd like to say first that that recommendation would hopefully come with some explanation, as you just did on this property, a scenario, so that we can see what the options are in terms of losing money, making money, or where do we stand. And if that's the case, I'll make the motion.
We have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. We're in discussion.
Do we have to demolish the structures before we?
No, you don't. Some of them, however, have been determined to be so unfit for occupancy or in such a state of disrepair that they present a danger. And when they do present a danger, then they are demolished. And that is an internal staff.
Right, but they would have to authorize us to actually demolish those.
Right, but as far as getting that to that stage, usually there's an assessment, and then staff says they need to be demolished, and that's presented to you in a report, and then action's taken thereafter.
I guess my point was, is there a way to do this without demolishing structures
Yes.
before they get to that point? Because, like I've said before, it kills my soul when certain buildings and trees go down. Because we shouldn't let them get to the point where they can't be saved.
Is this something that we should reach out to the Heart of Danville on and say, hey, these issues, these properties need your look? Because if something doesn't happen, this is where we are.
Well,
If in fact they're in the heart of Danville, that may be appropriate.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
well, isn't there something about to happen on Wilderness? Or that
You'll hear about that in a
area?
minute. It's a National Register nomination.
So, I mean, and this house has been condemned since 1989.
Yeah.
I mean, really, do we have to let them? Is there a reason it's been on the condemned list since 1989? And, so now we're to the point of no return where at some point in time, that could be refurbished and someone can make a home now. And when you demolish these structures, it's very difficult to rebuild something on empty lots in the city than to remodel something that is already existing. I just think there's a better way.
I understand your concern and the frustration with that. I will say that in some of these cases, there may be an instance of they're in such dilapidated states of disrepair or and maybe beyond rehabilitation because the question of ownership is a predicament. They have been in maybe generations through certain and various inherited states that the actual owners are undeterminable. And the ability to go through, there's a process to fix that. But again, it's time consuming. It's an allocation of resources from your standpoint. And, you know, I just want to clarify our language a little bit to be careful when we talk about these properties. We say, you know, why do we let these properties get to certain stages? You know, I think it's important in our verbiage that we remember that the city did not allow this to happen. The onus is definitely on owners to maintain and upkeep properties in a manner that's habitable and rises to the level of community standards. And the city is the bearer of those standards to a certain degree, but the burden shouldn't be shouldered by the city completely. Certainly action needs to be taken, and the city is ready, willing, and able to take those actions, but ultimately it comes down to ownership. And prior commissions may have said, listen, we value property rights in this country, in this Commonwealth, and it's not misplaced, and I was not shocked by the survey of other cities to say that they don't foreclose their liens. It's why eminent domain isn't terribly popular process. It has to be used in certain situations, but people typically hate it. It's necessary in certain situations, but people value property rights. So even though property's been condemned since 1989 and the city's taken no action on it, well, it could just show that there's a value of property rights there, and the city doesn't want to be in the business of taking ownership of land, which is really not a key element of what cities do anyway.
What about the property right of the person next door to that piece of property who keeps their property up, who's trying to maximize their value? What about their property right?
That's a consideration on the scale, for sure. But there, you know, again, which right is greater than the other? I'll leave that to you to determine.
That's why we get paid the big bucks.
That's right. That's right.
We have a motion and a second on the floor.
We did.
Yes, sir.
Can I call for the question on the motion?
Question's been called. All in favor of the motion?
Care to restate the
I was going to
motion,
ask
so-
that too. Could you restate the motion, just so we're clear?
Go ahead, Rick, you made it.
There's a motion for staff to come back to us with recommendations on what to do with some of these properties, along with an explanation of what would happen if we act on it.
Thank you.
Good?
Yes.
All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries.
I'm going to ask Joni House to come up, and I do want to just say thank you for letting us hire Joni part-time, because it has been a tremendous help thus far, and you'll see as she goes through the annual report and these applications that she's going to talk to you about what I'm talking about, and thank you again.
Thank you,
ma'am.
Bridget. Welcome, Ms. House.
Thank you, sir. Good evening to all of y'all.
Good evening.
This is my first one of these, so bear with me as I get my bearings and what I'm going to talk to you about. Last year, I believe you all approved a grant application for a data portal for all the city's historic resource assets. The first grant that we're going to talk about tonight is for the CRS surveyor, which is a phase 2 of the grant that's already been approved last year. Basically, what this grant does is it provides an application that will develop a very standardized tool for your historic resources, and that can be shared across local, state, and national boundaries. And you're going to ask me, why is that important? Well, it's very important in that we are able to have that information to plan for city development. And we do live in a tornado zone, folks, and if we have a tornado that goes down the main street of Danville, we really don't have any way to share that with any of our state or national partners, and this would be a very easy way to do that. So that is the basic reason that we need this. I believe that once this comes available, it will be very user-friendly, very easy for the public to do. We hope to work with a lot of volunteers to add new historic resources. And again, they'll be quite standardized, so whatever Danville says, they can look at the National Park Service. This is also a grant that would be in partnership with the Kentucky Heritage Council, the University of Kentucky, and the National Park Service. We are the flagship city, and I've heard Covington a lot tonight, and Covington, I believe, is the other flagship city that this will be produced in. Now, the biggie is, how much is this going to cost you? Well, we are going to be able to match all of our requirements with in-kind funding. That is my salary and the volunteers that we have. I come from a state background, folks, and I'm used to hunting money. So I know that's important to us. And I think it's a very usable format for us to be able to share our information. Danville's got quite a lot invested in our historic identity, and we hope that this would help do that. I'd be happy to take questions on that specific grant. I think we provided for you all that CRS surveyor, which talks a little bit about how they used it in Alexandria, Virginia, which was the initial place that they used this particular application at. Did you have any questions about that one? It's a rather complicated process, and it's my understanding that it's going to be a lot of working parts that I'm going to be working with to get this rolling. So you'll probably be seeing me again with this one at some point in the future. Any questions I can answer for you about that one? Nope. Okay. The second one is a little near and dear to my heart. Danville has expended a lot of funding and a lot of time really talking about the historic nature of our town, and there's no doubt we are one of the most historic cities in the state of Kentucky. And I think that one of the things that we need to do to really advance that is to get public buy-in. And the best way to do this, I think, is to give the public some free workshops that they can attend to help them understand why historic preservation is so important in this community. So we want to make these very approachable, very easy to handle, and some hands-on actually helping workshops. So this second grant would be to fund those workshops. And again, the best thing about this one, the feds through the Kentucky Heritage Council will be doing most of the funding, and all the matching grants will come from my salary and volunteers that we have. The 3 workshops that are being proposed would be pretty much a Historic Preservation 101 that lets folks come and understand design guidelines, understand where they come from, how they're using, and really what that means to you when you're in the historic district. The second one would be on windows. Historic windows are always an issue with folks that own historic properties. That's one of the big concerns I always hear. That's kind of like the monster in the cave doing my windows. So we've talked to some national folks who would like to come and do that. Again, it would be free to the public and hopefully a very hands-on demonstration of how you can make your historic windows work and not replace historic windows, which is the ultimate goal there. And the third would be on a National Register nomination class. That's always a big scary thing, trying to get your property on the National Register. Everybody wants one of those cool plaques, but it's not extremely easy to do. So I think that that would benefit everyone. And certainly we want to open these up to anyone who wants to come in the county or the adjoining communities of Junction and Perryville, because I think historic preservation is extremely important for the county. You know, there's that little battle that sets out there in Boyle County. So we have a lot of national following as far as our historic preservation. And again, I think we can easily do this, and my goal is to really make it very approachable so that historic preservation is not this word of, oh, it's all those rules and regulations, but more of a partnership with the city to do that. And so those are the 2 grants that we will be submitting. I think you folks have all the copies of them. As they're approved, we'll be submitting those to the Heritage Council this week. And I'm happy to answer any questions I can for you. Need a motion?
Yes, go ahead.
I move to approve Resolution 2018-02-1201.
We have a motion
Second.
and a second. We are in discussion.
Well, it may just be me, but I'm pretty clear on the second one, which I think is a marvelous idea.
Yep. Yep.
The first one's is still a little fuzzy to me. Can you give it Give it to me in the third graders.
I'll
sort
do
of.
my very best. It is a little convoluted. It's kind of complicated. It took me a minute to understand it too, to be honest with you. You all approved a grant for a data portal. That data portal will list all the historic preservation resources that we've got. It makes it accessible to the public. This is kind of an upgrade to that data portal, which will make everything that's on that data access standardized through the CRS Surveyor, which is an application that will be on that particular website. It will also be accessible through tablets that we'll purchase with this grant money. So it's almost a standardized historic preservation resource form. And it's being touted to help cities plan and make the language that comes from Danville easily explainable to the National Park Service in case you all do have a major fire or some disaster like that. Right now we have historic resource forms. Every city has different ones. Every state has different ones. This would be a standardized form that goes from all states into the local state and historic or national historic resource folks. And that's basically what it is. It's kind of an upgrade to the data portal that you all are doing now. And I know it's complicated. It took me a minute to figure out this, what exactly are we trying to do here? But it
That helps.
standardizes, it standardizes the form. So if, God forbid, you know, downtown Danville caught on fire, we would be able to get with the National Park Service and say, well, we lost these particular resources, and here's a really good real-time image and map of where these sources are. It also really talks about data. It will give data on settlement patterns, business trends within the city too. So it should help planning as we work on the historic district to get more businesses downtown. And it's really very new to me, so I'm trying to wade through it too as best we can. But that's my best third
That's
grade
great.
explanation for it.
That helps very much.
How you doing,
Thank
third
you.
grader? You got that?
Don't ask me to spell anything, but I understood.
And did I understand you to say that the city's portion is in kind courtesy of your presence?
Yes, sir, and there'll be some volunteer service. We're hoping
Okay.
to get volunteers with the community through the Heart of Danville because the Heart of Danville keeps our historic resource forms. So we're hoping to get folks to come and add new resources and work on that as volunteer time. So all that staff time's in kind.
And because we're in on the ground floor and we're a certified local government, there would be a fee for this application, but we won't pay any because we're doing this at the very beginning. So that's a good thing too, being a certified local government.
They're gonna use us as the legwork, so we get a freebie. So we like that.
Joni,
Fir-
it sounds like, I'm sorry.
No, please.
Yeah, it sounds like the portal also can serve as an information source
Yes,
for
sir.
tourism.
Yes.
Yeah, and that was something that Commissioner Terry was talking about in a different way, not so much with heritage, but in some cities are making it more available for people to come and get on their phone and say, I can find this place.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Genealogical tourism and finding out where you come from is a huge trend in the country right now. People want to know where they came from in Danville. I see that quite a bit as I do my other job. People are very interested in where they come from, where their ancestors come from, and this will give them there's all kinds of different applications that can be used with this. So it'd be nice to have a cell phone app at some point to talk about the city's historic structures. And I think this would help. They say there's a lot of different applications that can be used with this CRS surveyor, and so hopefully that would be one of them.
We have a motion and a
Wait,
second.
if I read the numbers right then, these two grants will total $10,000, and you're providing a $6,800 match through in-kind services and the fact that you're an employee of the city.
Well, yes, sir. Actually, the one grant in total would be $12,000, and the other is $4,000. And not just mine, but
Sure.
for the first grant, it breaks down like this. $7,600 would be the federal share. That would be what the National Park Service gives to the certified local government through the Heritage Council. Our match to that is $5,066, which would be staff time and volunteer time.
Yes.
So that's $12,600 for the first grant. The second grant, the federal match on that is $2,500. That would be the cash coming out of the Heritage Council. The required match on that is $1,666, which would be my staff time and volunteers. So the total on that one is $4,166.
Yeah, so a total of $16,800, but $6,800 is a match.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Call for the question?
Question's been called. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Resolution 2018-02-1201 passes.
And that's good. Sounds like a good
Thank you very
opportunity
much.
for us.
Now, I guess I'm the next on the agenda, too.
Yes, you are.
Okay. It's a big night for me. Through the Certified Local Government Program, the Kentucky Heritage Council requires that we turn in an annual report about how the certified local government is doing here in Boyle County. We gave you guys my report that has, or will be tomorrow, turned into the Heritage Council. And you also have what they require on that annual report, all the different questions. I think that folks have asked me, how's Danville doing? I give them a strong B+ on the Certified Local Government Program here. The big step that they made certainly was hiring me. I have a master's degree in historic preservation, and my goal is to really make the historic preservation program in Danville really match what we're doing in the rest of the state as far as the importance of Danville's history. The second thing I would point out is the new design guidelines. That took in a tremendous amount of effort for the code enforcement staff folks to get that done, and that was no short of miraculous, I'm sure, getting that through. They're very understandable, very easy to read, and very easy to deal with. So I think that was a huge step in that. So I think those are probably our two really big accomplishments. It asked us how many certified COAs that we did in the year. We did 19 that were approved as presented, 2 approved with conditions, 1 was referred back for additional information, then it was reheard and then passed. And then we referred 1 back to the applicant for additional information, and we have not yet heard anything from them for that. So these certificates of appropriateness are working in the city. They come fairly regularly, so I think they have helped a lot in getting folks to take better care of their buildings and understand what is required of them.
You haven't turned anybody just down flat.
Not that I'm aware of, sir, not that I'm aware of. And there is recourse certainly if they do that. It can come, I believe, in front of you all for that, if I'm not mistaken. But no, we haven't had to do that yet, which is a good thing.
Good.
We are working on a couple different district landmark designations. The Willis Russell House certainly is on my agenda to get done. We're working on that. We've put out a request for proposal to get that as a national register. I'm sorry, that is done through me. The historic landmark district for Wilderness Trace will also be dealt with. So I think they're kind of both working on them right now through old grants that we're doing. Those hopefully will be done before the summer's over. It takes quite a bit of work for that national district. I think there's 22 or maybe 20 separate structures that have to be looked at there. So we will have those and get that working fairly shortly. I think probably the place that we're lacking most is training with our DAHB board members. I really am going to push, I guess I'm going to be the official nag button to nag them to get training done. I believe that the second set of workshops will help with that. I'm hoping to get those certified as training, and that will be able to help those folks meet their training goals. We have done quite a bit to promote historic preservation in the community, and we'll be asking you guys once again as Historic Preservation Month comes upon us to pass a resolution recognizing the importance of that. We've done quite a bit of work. There's quite a bit left to do, and I'm pretty tickled to be here. I'm happy to answer any of your questions you have about that report. And certainly if you guys need to, at any time, talk to me about anything, I'm more than welcome to do that too. I don't know that we need any kind of motion or anything, but I'll be happy to answer anything you have about the report.
Any questions?
I have a question, it's probably for Ron. Are they eligible for any of the training that KLC offers? I know sometimes they have preservation or historic property trainings or seminars. Would
Potentially,
they?
potentially I could look into that.
Okay.
See, I don't know, maybe Bridget knows that.
I wouldn't see why they wouldn't be.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense.
As long as it's approved by the Heritage Council, but throughout the year, we probably have 200, 300, 400 opportunities through webinars or things going around the state that the Heritage Council sends to us that we forward on to the board members. So the opportunities are there. It's just getting the follow through sometimes.
Oh, okay.
But it would have to actually, and if there are League of Cities training, we can just submit that to Vicki Barenberg and she could review it and approve it.
But training hours are not required?
They have to have a minimum of two hours annually. We prefer to have a whole lot more, but they have to have a minimum of 2 to be on the board.
So we've got some work to do there. Any other questions or comments?
Thank you.
Ms. House, welcome to the team.
Well, thank you, sir. Y'all have a good evening. Thank you.
City manager report is next. Mr. Scott.
Yes, sir. Just 2 brief items to mention tonight. The first of those items is our meeting, a special meeting scheduled for Wednesday of this week, beginning at 12 noon here in the City Commission chambers, to have Jim Parsons from Northern Kentucky come down and discuss with the City Commission and the public the process of creating a TIF district, to discuss how that could work here, the opportunities and just the process of consideration if we should in fact do that. So it's an orientation session for the City Commission, and the public's invited to attend that meeting. But it's really a working session with the City Commission. So we're starting with a luncheon meeting at 12, a working lunch, sandwiches, that type of thing. Probably our meeting will last an hour and a half or thereabouts, I would say. Second, just a reminder to the local community agencies who have received the funding applications for the city. Those are due in 3 weeks. On Friday, March the 2nd is the due date for receipt of all of those for our consideration. We are in the early stages of budget preparation, and of course we'll be reviewing those as they come in, hopefully sooner rather than later. And those are the only 2 items I'd mention tonight.
Any questions of Mr. Scott? Comments?
Sure, I would. There was a pencil in of possible another meeting a week from this Wednesday. Do you have anything just for planning purposes?
Thought we switched that.
I think you maybe just said it was an open date, and I'm not sure if you filled it or not.
I think it's just an open date
Okay.
possibility. I'm not aware of
No, I've
Fire
got
station at 5,
any. The what?
fire station meeting.
Planning,
3 at 3, right?
5:30.
5:30.
Yeah, I think that was one of those dates we had questioned, and
I think that was an earlier date, and I'm not sure we're at the point of holding that meeting, but I'll double check that and circulate a memo to each of you. But I don't think that is scheduled.
Okay, well, if we show up here and you're not here, we're coming to your house.
Go proceed with that.
I would go to the
No,
fire
we're
station.
coming to your house.
Go to the fire station.
there's a lot of meetings that day.
Anything else? Seeing not, we are in the section of the meeting called Hear the Public. This is the public's opportunity to talk about any item that's important to our community that's not on the agenda. Anyone? Ms. Brown? How's Wilma?
Getting older every day.
Beats the alternative.
I love it. I love getting older. I have some comments. It concerns the budget, and actually specifically concerns the TIF program. And it's interesting that Mr. Parsons will be here Wednesday to talk about that, and I'll be here. Some concerns on that. I have expressed concerns before about spending taxpayers' money on hiring consultants or people who do preliminary studies, when I think that probably the city itself could have done preliminary studies. I understand if you do decide to go with the TIF program that any kind of legal documents obviously would have to have more expertise. But I think that we have certainly in our city manager someone who's very knowledgeable about about urban government and about the state of Kentucky. And I think also we have people like Jody Lassiter and Hal Good, who are also quite knowledgeable about local government and would be able to give some input on the TIF program itself. I'm wondering if there's a firewall between the city and EDP. I wonder if we can't use some of those sources when it comes to getting information on some of these important preliminary studies. We also have truly Michelle Gosser, who can certainly analyze a lot of financial situations and give us some clear information on that. So I'm wondering again why we need a consultant. We certainly on the internet, there are copious amounts of material on the TIF program. So study would be very easy to make on this, on the background of the TIF programs. It's been used in the United States since 1952. So obviously there are huge amounts of cities who have already done this, and we could have resourced their information. In Kentucky, it's been used since the year 2000. And on the internet, you can easily get information from the state of Kentucky. They have PDFs on the law, some very readable information on how to implement the law and what's contained in it. Also a list of 30 projects in Kentucky that have been made in the last 18 years and where those projects stand. And a lot of those are in Louisville and Lexington, but I noticed they're also in Ashland and Mayfield, Versailles, communities that are not much different from ours, and perhaps communities we could, again, have called rather than hiring someone to do the preliminary studies. The Kentucky League of Cities obviously has lots of information, and we pay dues to them, so I would hope that we could have used that resource also. Mr. Parsons himself has a 34-page PDF on the internet discussing of the TIF program. I also question on this particular situation what the hurry was on October 23rd in hiring Mr. Parsons for these preliminary studies. And I do not understand this at all, the hurry on it. This was not on the agenda. Mr. Scott was asking you to approve $20,000 plus the expenses for Mr. Parsons to hire him as a consultant. It was not on the agenda. The information was not in your packets. I think possibly you did get the agreement letter that Mr. Parsons wrote and sent to Mr. Scott, and also Mr. Scott's memo when you came here that evening, which is not enough time for you to assess, you know, the expenditure of $20,000. I understand that you have thought about the TIF program before, but as I could understand it, the mayor, the city manager, and the city attorney were the only ones that knew it was coming up that night. Now, I do commend Commissioner Series for trying to say, can we slow down? Can we look at this a little farther? Can we look at maybe other agencies who could go in with some of this funding with us? And he did ask Mr. Scott, is this an emergency? And Mr. Scott said, only if you don't think economic development is an emergency, which, besides being a rather snarky way to cut Mr. Sears off in his questioning, and valid questioning, I think you ought to do more of that. I also don't understand why he said that when the letter from Mr. Parsons is dated October 10th. Your meeting was October 23rd. Now, in this day and time, I would assume that the agreement letter that Mr. Parsons sent would have been sent by email immediately. If not, if it were sent by mail, it still would have given at least a week before the city commissioners' meeting for Mr. Scott to have gotten that on the agenda. So I don't understand why that was not put on the agenda. There was no way for the public to react to it because they did not know it was coming up. And there was very little way for the commissioners to react to it because it wasn't even in your packets.
Thank you, Wilma.
All right.
We're trying to keep these to...
I understand. I'll be back in a couple of weeks. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll move right along to commissioners' comments. Ms. Terry, ladies first.
JP.
I don't think I
Mr.
have
Brantley.
anything. Did you want to say something?
I just want to
Oh.
give him, I brought that 2 times. Extra copy for him. Great article.
What are we doing?
Just
Commissioner comments.
Commissioner comments.
I just have one. I was going to give a shout out to Ivy Turner, who was named the State Player of the Week for, I think, January 26th through the first part of February. So, good hometown girl, doing well for basketball. And I think she's just a sophomore or junior, isn't she?
Yeah.
So,
What about Van Cleve?
I was going to say, what about
Van
that?
Cleve won.
Yeah. Speak up, tell the
I thought
audience.
he was going to give Van Cleve one.
I'll leave that one to you.
Mr. Football for the state of Kentucky.
Yeah.
Danville High School senior. Was just amazed when I saw the article. It was the first time in the history of Danville football, 100-plus years, that we had our first Mr. Football. Well,
Yeah. And going to Wofford College.
we won't talk about that. Try to get him to stay local, but it didn't work.
Be a good fit.
Anything else?
Well,
Sure.
those are not my comments. I thought he was going to take care of that. We're celebrating February as Black History Month, so I want to give the audience and the viewers a little quiz this evening about local African-American Black history. Be quiet back there, Mr. Hunn. But 4 young men have come to my mind this evening, and I'll call their names out, then I'll ask you all to tell me who they are. John W. Bate, Robert Todd Duncan, Larnell Harris, and Frank X. Walker.
I know 3 of the 4.
I know 3, yeah.
Okay, and everybody knows Frank X. Walker because he's still alive, he's a poet, he's Kentucky's first African-American named as a poet laureate. Everybody knows John W. Bate because everybody knows that Bate Middle School was just renamed in honor of John Bate, but most folks don't know he was a former slave. He was educated at Berea College before the Day laws were passed, and he spent 55 years working and teaching kids in the community of Danville and Boyle County. And then Robert Todd Duncan was born in Danville, raised in Somerset, graduated from Ballard High School in Louisville, Kentucky, and went on to Howard University, where he got his degree in performing arts. Came back to Danville, Kentucky in 1950 to do a concert at Center College and refused to perform at Center unless he was allowed to perform to an integrated audience. And what was neat about that is that the Federated Women's Club, which we just heard about last year at the Soul on 2nd Street, well, rather the moving agent behind that concert. But probably the first integrated concert at Center College was done by native Danvillian Robert Todd Duncan, and he was the original person cast as Porgy and Bess. And then Larnell Harris, Mr. Harris is an international contemporary gospel singer, has won probably 25 to 30 Dove Awards and all kind of crazy stuff, and
Got several Grammys, too.
several
hasn't
Grammys, and spent a lot of his life here in Danville, and graduated from Western Kentucky and lived on Duncan Hill for part of the time. And a part of this lesson is that Bate Street, we assume, is named after John W. Bate, and I've just told everybody that I educated in this town that Duncan Hill was named after Robert Todd Duncan, but I don't have any proof of that. But good little lesson for the audience. Yes, sir.
There's 2 more that you.
Oh, I got another meeting this month, so, okay.
Cover them all at once.
I'm gonna quiz you, Mr. Atkins.
Okay, go ahead, brother.
Do you know anything about Robert Harding or either Oscar Butler?
Oh, yeah.
2 Danville. Okay,
Oscar Butler lived in California, was an inventor, has several patents with the United States federal government.
Yeah.
And who was the other one you want to quiz me about?
Robert Harding.
Robert Harding was a educator, football coach. Let's see, was it something about Ohio State? Columbus, Ohio or something?
What about being a U.S. Civil rights attorney?
Okay, all right, there you go. All right.
There is a whole to say. Anyway, Sylvan College has a whole barrage of African-American history in the library at Sylvan College. And that's going to be running from the 11th until the 27th, I believe.
Of February.
Yeah, February.
And then
The next 2 weeks.
Then the Danville County Public Library is doing some stuff. But I just picked those 4 out as I was driving to the meeting tonight. There's a, no, watch this. There's an there's a Danville County African-American history quiz, a scavenger hunt that has about 75 questions on it. And the Advocate Messenger, through the years, has been the source of the evidence for those different characters. So a lot of information about local Danville County-born African-American citizens. I just thought I'd throw it out there this evening. And I will do some again next meeting. Lord willing, right?
Anything else you want to do on Black History Month?
Well, I was going to do James Hunt Sr. and James Hunt Jr., but he just flew up for it, so I won't do that one now, right? Just kidding.
They're not juniors and seniors.
Oh!
I'm James L. and he's James M. So.
In the interest of time, I will only elaborate that Mr. Scott and I spent pretty much all day Wednesday in Frankfort at the Kentucky League of Cities Board of Directors meetings, and after that, we spent some time with our legislators and sought to address some issues that are important to the city of Danville. And I must say, for as much cynicism as we have, and certainly I have, I must say that I was very impressed by the decorum of committees and the content of conversation in those committees. And I would encourage anybody during this legislative session to go to Frankfurt and just observe. It's good. It's good. That's all I got.
And Mr. Mayor, before we move on, I forgot to do my major task for tonight. And that is that April the 4th, 2018 marks the 50th commemoration of the assassination of Martin Luther King. And so I wanted to ask the commission to assist me in appointing an ad hoc committee, community-wide ad hoc committee, to do a Danville celebration in commemoration of the 50th.
That's a great idea. Put me down. How do we want to go about doing this? Do we want to put something out on the website? How do we want to go about it?
I'd like to put something on the website, but also would like to ask other commissioners to toss out some groups or some names of people who might be willing to assist in this. What's happening is that around the country, people are celebrating this event, and it's becoming a commercialized event. And I don't want to honor a man of that stature by making it a commercialized event. The 4th of April, in the city of Frankfort, Kentucky, there's going to be a statewide march in honor of this 50th anniversary. But the thing that I'd like to see people do, and don't you all shoot the messenger, but Dr. King died on the 4th of April in Memphis, Tennessee. But what we don't remember, a lot of people don't remember, is that on the 8th of April, 1968, after his assassination, Coretta Scott King went back to Memphis and led the march that her husband didn't get to lead. And it was a silent march. And so I've got the 4th of April and the 8th of April on my brain, my heart, to do something someplace in this community so we can recognize the fact that that event happened.
I guess the reason I'm so interested in it is because I think lost on Martin Luther King Day is the content of Martin Luther King.
Yes.
I only once have I heard anyone in Danville in the last 7 or 8 years give any kind of content about the man, his character, and his wisdom. And I'd certainly like to see us go back to that on an annual basis in this community, because there's certainly a lot there that can be shared without getting bored.
Well, is there a ministerial association still active in Danville and Moore County?
No, and
Well, with your permission, I'd like to contact a variety of faith-based people in our town. I'd like to invite the NAACP to come to the table to plan this with us. We have our own Danville Moore County Human Rights Commission. And then we have an agency that's 25, 26 years old called Citizens Concerned for Human Relations. I'd like to ask some of those types of agencies to come around the table and help us plan a community-wide celebration, just to get the conversation started. And to get our school-age students. Center College has a diversity organization as well. But there's something.
Or you want to do it on the 4th?
Well, the 4th is important, and the 8th is important, but if the committee came together and wanted to do a series of things, I think it'd be neat to sort of leave it up to the committee. I volunteer to be a member because I want to be the driving force behind it, but I told you all about doing some presentations. I'm going to do a program the 10th of March for the Perryville community, and I'm doing a program, I think it's the 11th of March at the public library. And I just simply called it M.L. King 50 years later.
Any chance of getting Maricas to do the speech again?
I would love to get him to come, because he's in Louisville. He's talking about Maurice
Lofton.
He's in Louisville.
is that the gentleman that used to work in the governor's office?
Yeah, done a little bit of everything.
Oh, he
Federal
killed
judge and
it.
Everything, yeah.
He's
He
great.
killed
I
it.
mean,
Yeah,
and
that's great. That's the only time I have heard content
Yeah.
of that caliber.
Well, President Welch did content at one not too long ago that just was like, well, because he had a personal experience. But you're right, content.
Well, that might be one of your speakers at the next M.L. King celebration.
Yeah, okay. Mr. Dexter was getting ready to tell us stuff and give us some guidance.
Well,
think.
I was just going to say, if you want to, as a matter of process, if you want to actually formally have an ad hoc committee, I would suggest prior to the next meeting that you maybe address possible composition of that committee with the city manager, who can relay that to me, and we can put together just in a resolution format who may participate. If this is going to be a city sponsored event, who in fact would participate, kind of some outline some maybe goals and objectives or roles and responsibilities, and then we can actually formally adopt that by resolution. I think that'd be the best process to adhere to at the next meeting, just to formally establish it, to recognize what the goal and objective is in some type of tangible manner, and then go forth.
And Mr. Dexter, I'm too young to remember this, but probably about 30-some odd years ago, when M.L. King holiday became a national holiday, the city had a committee that was responsible for the planning and da-da-da and da-da-da. So there might be some information on our records about a committee that's been
Long since defunct.
lost, and yeah.
There may be. Sometimes I feel like I've been here 30 years, but I haven't.
you're just a young man.
Yeah.
You're a young man.
I don't know if we have anything like that in our records or
Probably
not,
not. Probably
but
not, yeah.
I think we can, it wouldn't be hard to, it'd probably be easier for us to simply
agree. Yeah.
start
So
from
you're
ground
going to
zero.
get with Mr. Scott, correct?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
great suggestion.
And I'll
Yeah.
try to think of folks that
Yeah,
be interested in helping.
I like
Well,
that.
Mr. Hunt and we've talked for years, Mr. Hunt and I have talked for years about the fact that if Martin Luther King came to Danville, Kentucky at one time, he'd go to one church. If he came to a second time to Danville, he'd go to a different church. Wouldn't always be Baptist, wouldn't always be black. And so we need to make it a community celebration again. And I just think this is the time to do it, so that when next January rolls around, 2019, we've already got something in place in the community to worry about what's going on.
Great job, J.H. Anyone else? Rick?
I'll be real quick. I appreciate what you are doing there, Commissioner Atkins. We're always proud of our youth, and just in today's paper, so I'm going to do a shout out for the Danville High School academic team, Governor's Cup champions. And that might be something we want to think about recognizing actually at a meeting, as well as the forensic champs, the regional champs from Danville High School as well. So we're always proud of our youth, and I don't want to ignore an opportunity to do that. It was also a proud moment for most of the local businesses at the Chamber banquet. There's a lot of great folks there, a lot of great awards that went out, and so it makes you feel proud about your city and what things are going on with it. So, and last but not least, that wayfinding project is still moving forward, right?
If there's no other comments, I'll move right on to item 12, payment of the bills, which you have before you. Chair will entertain a motion to pay the bills as presented.
So move.
Thank you,
Second.
Mr. Atkins. Thank you, Ms. Terry. Any further discussion, questions? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item 13 is the first reading of ordinance number 1911. This is in regard to sewer limits amendment. Mr. Coffey.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners. The ordinance you have in front of you is actually a revision of the last ordinance that we did a few months ago. The state wanted a couple deleted that we had left on there, iron and phenol, and also hexavalent chromium needs to be on one line, which it's just purely a matter of technicality.
I wondered about that.
Yeah, that was the critical one.
Yeah, I was looking at
Bob
that
also.
myself, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah,
That
we were all
hexavalent
thinking the same
part seemed
thing, yeah.
confusing on one line like that.
Sorry we didn't catch that earlier.
Yeah, should have.
Yeah,
I
our
mean,
fault, Earl, our
He
fault.
thought he was gonna drink it, right?
The bigger problem for them was, to be clear, was the fact that we didn't delete a couple of them. They felt, they just wasn't comfortable being on there. They didn't
Okay.
have a limit, like cyanide, I think they wanted it off there.
So do we have a motion?
I'll move for the first approval of the first reading of ordinance 1911.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Second, does she need to read that?
Thank you, ma'am. She does, and she needs to do roll call. Do you need to read this?
Okay, this is the first reading of ordinance 1911, an ordinance amending City of Danville, Kentucky Code of Ordinance, Section 1856E pertaining to sanitary sewer industrial discharge limits, and Section 1883 pertaining to monthly sewer service charges for industrial customers. Commissioner Atkins?
Yes.
Commissioner Terry?
Yes.
Mayor Paris?
Yes.
Commissioner Cottle?
Yes.
Commissioner Series?
Yes.
I might add that this past Friday, Earl and the city of Danville hosted the Danville Rotary at the water treatment facility. I become more impressed with that every time I'm there, and the PowerPoint presentation that you had, I think, is quite interesting. You might consider sharing that sometime. But it underscores the fact that we've got a heck of a facility. And the majority of the public, as long as they turn the faucet and it comes on, they're happy. We have a state-of-the-art facility, and if there's other groups out there that you can think of that would like to have a nice program, we've got the facility for it.
And that's also for a meeting
Yeah, absolutely.
establishment now. If you just have a meeting, you would like to hold it out there, it's a very nice facility also.
Yeah, and actually, to follow up on your comment, Earl, you may want to comment, there's some planning for some education during Earth Day week instead of just Earth Day. So appreciate Earl jumping in on the city's behalf to hold those educational seminars for kids, both at the water treatment plant and at the wastewater plant. So, yeah.
Do we have an executive session?
Oh, do we have an executive session tonight?
Yes, sir, we do have the request for an executive session tonight.
What would that pertain to?
It would pertain to personnel matters.
All right. Well, I move that we go into executive session to discuss personnel matter pursuant to KRS 618101F.
You got that one memorized now?
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Opposed, like sign. We are in executive session. Motion, we move back into regular session.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. We are in regular session.
So moves.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign.
We would also ask that you hire Sandra Cloud to the position of 901 telecommunicator with the Beautiful Corporation.
So moved.
moves.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And lastly, we would ask that you hire Billy Gooden and Chris Sauer to the position of firefighter recruits.
So moved.
So moved.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries.
Move we adjourn.
Motion's been made to
Second.
adjourn. There's a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. We're adjourned.